look at a few more things. Another thing to think about is these numbers are a little old. These are from 2004, but I found somebody that broke these things down, so I just wanted to kind of show you this. Is there's also huge HDI variation within countries. So sometimes people will say, well, they might be saying, well, this country, they're surprised that a country, for example, is kind of in the middle of the development level because they thought the country was very poor. But what they may know about it is there might be a region of that country or an ethnic group in that country which is very poor. Okay, this is an example. So looking at Guatemala, our one of our examples that we've been talking about the Guatemala quite a bit in this class. So if we compare Guatemala by ethnic group, then things look a lot different. Okay, so if we look at Guatemala, so Latino refers to the population that's not indigenous, or and the population that considers themselves Latino, and they're not and Spanish speaking, and they're not one of the indigenous populations in Guatemala. Their average income would be equivalent to like Indonesia, and they're just slightly, you can tell they're the majority of the population because they're just slightly above the average, right? And then we have these other three groups whose human development index measures, if we consider them as their own country, would be very low, comparable to Cameroon and Zimbabwe. Okay, so this is just an example of how different things can be, for example, between ethnic groups in the same country. Then also continuing on now looking at regions and not ethnic groups. If we look at Kenya, well, Kenya is somewhere, you know, in the upper part of the I think it's in the lower part of middle. Then if we look at Nairobi, Nairobi is about equivalent to Turkey's development. Mombasa, which is another large city on the coast, is about equivalent to South Africa. But then if we look at Busia and Turkana, Turkana is in the far, I believe Turkana is in the far north west of the country. The development level is amongst the lowest in the world. Okay, so we see big differences even within regions of the same country. To make one more example, and this is to compare China to other parts. So China has a big gap between urban and rural. So the urban part is pretty developed, the rural part is lagging quite far behind, but then it also has a big gap between regions. Okay, so at the time when this is done, and this is way back in 2014, all these numbers have shifted way up for China since then. But at the time, Shanghai was equivalent to Greece, okay, in the urban area, and then another two provinces that were fairly poor provinces is the rural areas of Gansu and Guizhou were equivalent to like India and Cambodia. Okay, so we had this big wide range even going on within the same country, and this is something to keep in mind, that even once a country gets to middle income or even into the high income, there could still be regions or ethnic groups who are lagging behind, and so it's kind of important to keep these things in mind when looking at a country. So we've looked so far at income and income growth, and those are both related to this topic. And so the rest of this section is just going to be looking at education and health for this week and also the week after the exam. And so we can see what countries do to improve those, and we can see that those things will have two effects, right? So education and health will have two effects. One is they will help people in general, and so that's the HDI, right? The human development. They're going to help people personally in general. They're going to help them, but then they're also going to help income growth in the future because we got more human capital. Okay, so we're going to look at what countries can do, what countries are doing to promote education and health, and we'll be looking at those some this week and a whole lot more in the 9th week of the class.